March 15, 2025, might just go down as the most ironic day in the nearly 1,200-day-long Russia-Ukraine conflict. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky proudly announced that his Avdiivka offensive was a success, claiming it had wiped out Russia's remaining elite forces while boosting Ukraine's military standing. According to him, Russian troops had abandoned their weapons and fled in panic, leaving behind advanced military equipment. Meanwhile, in Moscow, Vladimir Putin played his cards masterfully. Instead of reacting with outrage, he flipped the script on the West. As the U.S. and Ukraine pushed for a 30-day ceasefire agreement, NATO dealt a devastating blow to Kyiv by shutting the door completely on Ukraine's hopes of joining the alliance. So, what's the truth behind Zelensky's victory speech? How did one statement from Putin completely flip the battlefield narrative? Let's break it down. Russia's ultimatum, surrender or be destroyed. Moscow issued a stark warning to Ukraine's forces in Avdiivka: surrender now or face total annihilation. Putin made his position crystal clear. Yesterday, I was in Avdiivka, receiving reports from our top military commanders about the frontline situation. Everything there is under our complete control. The Ukrainian forces that entered Russian-held territory have been fully encircled. At the start of the battle, Ukrainian forces could still withdraw in small groups, but now, impossible. They've abandoned their heavy weaponry, and any remaining troops can only escape in groups of 2 or 3, if they're lucky. The Russian president offered 2 choices to Ukrainian soldiers trapped in Avdiivka. 1, surrender and survive. 2, fight and be eliminated. Former Russian President Dmitry Medvedev, now deputy chairman of Russia's Security Council, made it even more brutal. We're being extremely humane here. But for the Ukrainian Nazis, if they refuse to lay down their arms, they will be systematically wiped out, without exception. To add pressure, he told Kyiv's leadership, use these final hours wisely if you want to save your troops. Trump steps in, pleads for Ukrainian soldiers' lives. Back in Washington, Donald Trump made a rare move, pleading for the lives of Ukrainian troops. Biden never should have allowed this war to happen, Trump said. First off, you don't pick fights with someone way bigger than you, no matter how much money you have. We've dumped a fortune into Ukraine, money, weapons, tech, and what's happening now? Thousands of Ukrainian soldiers are trapped and in deep trouble. I asked Putin to spare them. Let those men go. We don't want them to die. But Kyiv wasn't having it. Ukraine's general staff immediately dismissed Trump's concerns, calling the Russian reports of a total encirclement nothing more than propaganda aimed at pressuring Ukraine and its allies. They insisted that Ukrainian troops had strategically repositioned to stronger defensive positions and were still fighting effectively in Avdiivka. Zelensky himself doubled down, declaring that the real goal of the Avdiivka operation wasn't to hold territory, but to draw Russian forces away from key battlegrounds like Bakhmut, Kharkiv, and Sumy. The problem? That's not what Ukraine originally promised. For months, Kyiv had vowed to use Avdiivka as a bargaining chip in future negotiations with Moscow. Now suddenly, it's a strategic withdrawal. It sounds a lot like 1975, when a certain president ordered a strategic retreat from the Central Highlands of Vietnam and lost the entire war. But there's a bigger issue. Zelensky hasn't confirmed whether all of his troops actually made it out of Avdiivka. Did he just abandon thousands of his own men to die? That's a question he can't dodge, no matter how hard he tries. Putin's response to Trump: sure, I'll spare them if they surrender. Russia's leader wasted no time in responding to Trump's request. We've seen President Trump's statement calling for mercy for the Ukrainian troops encircled in Avdiivka. We understand his humanitarian concerns. That said, if they lay down their arms, they will be treated with respect. Their lives will be spared. But Ukraine's leadership must order them to surrender. And there it was, the perfect trap. If Ukraine orders a surrender, it's an official loss, handing Russia a victory. If Ukraine refuses, Zelensky becomes the man who sent thousands of his own soldiers to die. Either way, Putin wins. Putin's next move: outmaneuvering the U.S. and NATO. Moscow isn't just playing the battlefield, it's playing the long game. By agreeing to a US-backed ceasefire, but with conditions, Putin has bought himself time to consolidate gains, forced Trump's administration to reveal how much pressure it's really willing to put on Ukraine, kept NATO divided on how to proceed. Russia's strategy has always been simple: drag out negotiations, giving just enough hope to keep the process going, without making real concessions. Putin's remarks drew a sharp contrast between Moscow's and Kiev's approaches to peace talks. Ukraine wants an immediate ceasefire, followed by negotiations with security guarantees from the West. Russia insists that a ceasefire must be part of a broader deal that addresses the entire root cause of the war. Translation: Putin doesn't see negotiations as a discussion. He sees them as a way to dictate Ukraine's surrender terms. Zelensky knows this, but what can he do? Nothing. Even his biggest backer, the U.S., is now openly admitting that Ukraine poked the bear too hard. Biden might deny it, but Trump, he's spelling it out plainly. If you're weak, don't start fights. Don't mess with someone stronger than you. And NATO, they're backing off too. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte just confirmed that the idea of Ukraine joining NATO is now completely off the table. Rutte even ruled out NATO troops enforcing any future ceasefire. Just weeks ago, some NATO members floated the idea of sending troops to Ukraine as peacekeepers. Now, that idea is the final score. Nobel Peace Prize for Trump, Hero of the Ukrainian People Medal for Zelensky, resources for the U.S., land for Russia, and Ukraine left with nothing. No NATO, no military victory, no clear path forward. In the end, Zelensky's biggest fear may not be losing the war. It may be realizing that, to the world, Ukraine was just another pawn in a much bigger game.